Alrighty, hello everyone. For this video, I'm going to share some general tips for sketching. Today, I'm going to use POSCA markers since I haven't used them in a while, and I'll be doing this in a Cottonwood Arts sketchbook. I really like the smooth texture of their paper, and it takes marker media really well. I also like the fact that the sketchbook opens flat, so we don't have to worry about that book bump you get from the spine. Anyway, let's get started. So right now I'm doing a warm-up sketch in my sketchbook. I'm using a Prismacolor Verithin in 736 Spanish orange, but really, to me, this is just a yellow sketching pencil. You can literally use a Crayola. I like Verithin since it's a harder pencil versus a regular Prismacolor pencil, and the difference between a Verithin and just a regular Prismacolor color pencil is that the color pencil is really waxy and smooth. It's really great for coloring, but the sharp tip won't last as long for sketching like a Verithin. Anyway, I'm using yellow specifically since it's really easy to paint over with these opaque paint markers. Now, moving on to the next drawing, I'm just kind of drawing whatever I feel like. But I do keep a few things in mind: proportion, form changes, and silhouette. Proportion, I think, is something you gotta practice and get a feel for over time. You're not gonna get it right the first few times, and I still don't get it right from time to time. But a lot of my early drawings were very not proportionate, with limbs that were either too long or too short, and hands and feet that were either way too big or way too small. And the overall balance of the character just wasn't there. Stylized characters with quote-unquote disproportionate body parts still stick to a rule of balanced proportions. This is what makes an appealing character design. It's a play on big, medium, small shapes and how they balance with each other. Now, form changes can really help bring volume to your drawings. When I was teaching high school art, I would show my students how you can wrap or draw a string around an object in 2D space to make it look more three-dimensional. So, in the same way, I'm using the clothes to communicate the form changes of the body. This can also show which direction and perspective a body part is facing. For my drawing, I've generalized the direction of the perspective to be facing upward, and the far leg out and away words. I hope that makes sense. The placement of her ears can also determine which direction she is looking, or in this case, tilting. I've placed her ears lower on her head to make it look like she's tilting her head backwards and her chin up. This overall pose isn't anything specific, or any specific action or mood. She's, in my case, voguing. Which brings us to our next point, silhouette. When I was a small child in primary school, all of my character drawings were long beings with their arms out in an A pose. Or, because I didn't want to draw their hands, they were always arrested. So, through the years, I've learned the importance of silhouette. Why is it important? It's about how the drawing will read or communicate to the viewer. If you were to completely fill in the drawing with a solid color, will the drawing still read as your desired subject matter? Can you see what they're doing? And is their action or pose clear? A great example of silhouette can be found in the one and only mega tycoon, Mickey Mouse. His silhouette is so iconic that if I drew it right now, I would get a cease and desist slapped in my face for using it in a video. Anyway, a great way to practice silhouette is to literally paint and draw solid characters with absolutely no facial or body detail. You can also completely paint in or shade in your current drawing to check how the silhouette is reading. If you can't read it, consider changing the pose to create a negative shape within the pose. For example, in my current drawing, the character's arm, screen left, has created a negative space beside her waist. I like to paint a small background to highlight the negative spaces and pop out the character's overall form. Now, for the POSCA markers! Yay! These markers had a small learning curve for me to get the hang of. They're pretty different from an alcohol-based marker or a permanent marker since they're paint. The tip is springy, which allows some paint flow control through the tip. Right now, I'm just kind of line arting or going over the final lines of my drawing so that I know what to paint and shit. I'm using a fine point marker, which is still pretty round, and I think is the smallest of the round felt tips. The ultrafine tips are a plastic point without any fibers, which is pretty great for like small details or if you're drawing fine lines. So yeah, a very fast color theory lesson here in like 2 seconds. These markers are great for creating limited palettes since there's only a limited number of colors that these markers come in. It's great. Copic markers come in hundreds and hundreds of colors that it can get really exhausting and daunting when creating a palette. So for this drawing, I've selected blue, yellow, and orange. I think that's a split complementary. Yes, it is. Generally, you want to use varying percentages of these colors. You never want to use an equal percentage of each color. It just doesn't look good. In this case, I'm using blue for the character, yellow as the background, and orange to accent. I'm not good at geometry, but visually, I'm using the colors in this ratio. Ha, yeah, Bachelor's of Science. These markers will pill the paper if you are too heavy-handed, or if you don't have enough paint flow in the tip. It'll just start to rub and create friction and then just deteriorate your paper. But I have yet to master zero pillage on this paper, but I figured out how to minimize the amount of pilling that happens. Just know that it's gonna pill no matter what, I guess, unless you're painting on a non-fibrous surface like rocks, which apparently a lot of people do with these markers. I found that a light hand with a fairly wet tip works really well to fill and paint the surface without worrying about pilling the paper too much. Be sure to dispense ink away from your drawing, otherwise you could mistakenly dispense too much ink and it's ink roulette from there. Occasionally, you will get these little fibers gathered on the tip of your marker, probably from the pilling from the paper. So, to kind of clean off your marker tip, I would suggest having a piece of scrap paper around to kind of brush off these little fibers because it can really get in the way of doing fine detail or filling in spaces without extra texture on your paint tip. Use continuous strokes while painting to minimize streaking and also to just keep the paint flow consistent. Once you start feeling some resistance or friction, be sure to dispense a little bit more ink into the tip so that way you have another smooth continuous run of painting. And that's pretty much it, really. You can go over these paints. Once it's dry, you can go back with another color on top, or if you wanted to change your mind on a color, you can paint over it like you would acrylics. But do keep in mind that it's going to saturate the paper even more and cause, in some cases, ripping or extreme pilling, and then you'll just have all this texture on your paper and it doesn't really look good. But you can always fix that in post. So you can either stop here and give these markers a try, or you can keep watching and see how you can clean up your drawing on Photoshop and have it ready for digital platforms. The first thing I do in Photoshop is to duplicate the actual image as a separate layer with a solid color layer underneath. That way, if I mess up, I can just duplicate the layer from the original scan without having to open an entirely new file. Then I'll play around with the levels to get the whites as white as possible and the darks somewhat dark enough to get a decent color brightness. At this point, I'll go in and lasso and paint out all the background white paper. Keep in mind, the layer underneath is black, so I can see all of the white that I need to erase. I'm not actually painting it black. It's technically transparent. Take a look at my layers. Then I'll go in, and at first I was using the clone stamp tool to keep some of the texture, but then I just decided to color pick off the actual drawing itself, so using the off-white to clean up my yellow pencil lines that came through in the scan, and also to color pick any of the painted areas to erase the apparent paper pilling, and also to clean up some of the line art. I kept some of the paint strokes rather than filling in with cell color since I want to showcase this as a POSCA drawing rather than a flat cell-shaded digital drawing. And so there we have it, a cleaned up POSCA drawing that is ready to post on the gram or any digital platform. You can find this illustration and many more on my Instagram. Ha ha, shameless plug. Anyways, I hope you guys found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover. These kinds of videos are really new for me, but pretty fun to make. And so if you'd like me to make more, let me know. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye!